finally, the polar bear. He's headed back to Queens. Pete Alonso returning to the Mets on a 2-year, $54 million deal. He'll get $30 million in 2025, and he does have an opt-out after the first season. This was sorely needed, I think, on both sides. Alonso wanted to go back to the Mets. The Mets needed to lengthen out their lineup, and so they do get their guy back. And as we said on our first base preview, this was the best possible landing spot for Pete Alonso. Maybe outside of Cincinnati, there were some rumblings of them getting involved. That would have been pretty awesome too. But it was a down season for Pete. Still a premier power bat who gets to hit behind Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. So the counting stats should be awesome here, Chris. The Fantasy Pros ADP 43.6. Do you pay the price for Pete Alonso? And how much do you think he rises after returning to the Mets?
I think he probably rises a little bit. I'm not sure he should. Just because there are some worrying signs in the profile that we've seen over the past couple of years. The quality of contact is more good than elite now. He has an all-field swing that is probably especially at risk of losing home runs when he loses bat speed. And so I think he should go around 50. I would guess he's going to move up a little bit after signing, just because we have that confirmation that, yes, he's going to be hitting behind Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. And, I think his career high is like 131 RBI. That's not outside the realm of possibility here. This is going to be a pretty phenomenal place for him to hit. Obviously, like literally Citi Field is not a great place to hit. And so, that's the other concern when you're talking about a guy who may just have plus power instead of plus power, but he's going to have so many opportunities to hit with runners on base. He's going to have so many opportunities to drive in runs that even if it's a low batting average and more like 35 homers than 40, I still think he's going to be very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Some other hitters going right around this ADP for Pete Alonso in the 4th round. Corey Seager. Chris, would you rather have Alonso or Corey Seager?
I have Corey Seager ahead.
What about Alonso or Jose Altuve?
I think I have Altuve ahead.
And then Alonso or Kyle Schwarber, which kind of seems like they would have similar outputs, but obviously Schwarber leading off for the Phillies. So maybe more runs scored, more RBI for Alonso. And Alonso has a position Schwarber doesn't. So who would you take in that case?
I'll go Alonso there.
All right. The other side of this is that Mark Vientos will stick at third base. It's bad news for some of those ancillary pieces on the Mets, the Ronnie Mauricios, Brett Beatties, and Luis Angel Acuñas of the world. They were going to be competing for that third base job if Pete Alonso was not back. Do you plan to boost any of the other Mets, Chris? Because we have a proven run producer here. I mean, I don't know how much you could boost someone like Lindor or Soto.
Yeah.
Maybe Mark Vientos could have even more counting stats.
He's going to probably bat lower in the lineup as a result of this. He might go from 3rd to 5th in the prospective lineup. So I guess I don't see much reason to move anyone up. It does make the sleeper case for Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuña less obvious, although there is still they have Jesse Winker penciled in at DH, Jeff McNeil at 2nd. I know he had a good second half, but neither of those seem like insurmountable obstacles to playing time. If, Acuña, what he showed last year was real at all, or Ronnie Mauricio, the upside he has, I can still see a path to those guys becoming, relatively everyday players for the Mets. It's probably not going to happen right away. It would probably require some injuries, and so I don't know how draftable those guys are, but certainly Ronnie Mauricio and Luis Angel Acuña seem like names to keep in mind as the season goes on.
Yep, and just to read off this lineup, it does look pretty good top to bottom now. Lindor, Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Mark Vientos, Jesse Winker, Francisco Alvarez, Jeff McNeil, Jose Siri, and some of those young names waiting in the wings. Starling Marte kind of on the outside looking in too, but I guess maybe a short side platoon with Jesse at DH. Let's move over to Jack Flaherty, who is headed back to the Detroit Tigers on a 2-year, $35 million deal. The contract that he winds up settling for here is pretty shocking when you consider, I think Frankie Montas got $34 million.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand there are risks here with Jack Flaherty, but still feels like he probably should have got more years and more money than what he wound up with. He will make $25 million in this upcoming season, has an opt-out after 2025. So if he has another big year, hopefully gets back on the market and could land himself a longer-term deal. But this was maybe the best landing spot for Jack Flaherty as well. He was awesome in his 18 starts with the Tigers, 2.95 ERA, 0.96 WHIP, 11.2 K per nine, 14% swinging strike rate. He dealt with some injuries midseason, has a long history of back injuries, regressed some once he went over to the Dodgers. Chris, I'm not expecting Flaherty to get all the way back to the pitcher he was with the Tigers, but I think he will be slightly better than he was with the Dodgers. So what do you think about this landing spot for him?
It's a best case scenario, pretty much. The Tigers should be competitive, if not, they're not going to win 90 games, but they should be a decent team. And it's a great park to pitch in. Chris Vetter, rightly, I think, has a very good reputation as a pitching coach. He's done great work with Flaherty last season. And I think that was part of why he wanted to go back, but also Tarek Skubal and, Reese Olson and a few other guys. So I think there's a lot to like about this landing spot. And I think it makes Flaherty a top 30 pitcher. I've got this tier, and I was looking ahead at some of the questions we're going to talk about later, and I've got a tier of pitchers right around 30 to 35 that I just don't know what to do with because there's big injury risks with all of them. And Flaherty probably belongs in that range with like Spencer Strider and Roki Sasaki and Shohei Ohtani and Tyler Glasnow. I think you can put him at the top of that list. He threw more innings than any of them last year. But, obviously we have seen 5 of the last 6 seasons now. Things can go really wrong, or I guess 4 of the last 6 seasons. When things go wrong for Jack Flaherty, they can go really wrong. So still a high variance pitcher, but a 10th round pick, a solid, mid-rotation starter. I think that makes a lot of sense for fantasy.
Yeah, you just mentioned right there, mid-rotation starter. Ideally, what would you want Flaherty as? Your SP3, SP4 for fantasy?
I think SP3 probably makes the most sense. And but the thing is, this is the range where I'm probably getting back into pitching. My pitching strategy is I want an anchor, maybe 2. I've done that before in the first couple of rounds. And then historically, rounds 4 through 10 are not great places to pick pitching. Or I guess the better way to say it is the difference between pitchers drafted in the 4th round and pitchers drafted in the 10th round over the past decade is basically nothing. I wrote about this for CBSSports.com. I've got all the data. It's actually kind of stunning how, and I can go into the specifics if you want, but I figure we'll save that for the SP preview next week.
Yeah,
maybe the week after. But the point is, I want to pick at the back of that tier. I want more in the 9th, 10th round to start to get back into pitcher. And so Flaherty will probably be in that range. So I think he's a ideal SP3, but a workable SP2 if you really need to stretch it that far.
The ADP for Flaherty is 133.2 as the 40th starting pitcher off the board. Chris, would you rather have Flaherty or Shane McClanahan?
Flaherty.
What about Flaherty or Carlos Rodon?
I like Rodon, but I would take Flaherty.
And Flaherty or Kodai Senga?
Senga, I just don't really know what to do with. I have him 2 spots ahead of McClanahan in my pitcher rankings, so I would still take Flaherty over those guys.
All right. The updated Tigers rotation, by the way, includes Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Alex Cobb, and according to Cody Stavenhagen, hope I got that right, Stavenhagen of The Athletic, Jackson Jobe seems likely to claim an opening day rotation spot. So that is a pretty formidable
spot. Pretty fun, yeah. And remember,
Tigers.
Jackson Jobe, RP eligible, for fantasy. So that's a big deal for your head-to-head points leagues. I think he could be a top 150 pick in those leagues just because the upside if he hits as an RP is, I mean, Garrett Crochet last year. Is that overstating it?
That could be, yeah. Like,
I mean, we're talking about the
outcome. Yeah.
The second best pitching prospect in the world after Roki Sasaki. Like there's a lot to like there.